The fluorescent lights of the courthouse hallway buzzed softly, a monotonous hum that seemed to amplify the tension hanging in the air. Dustin Angelere sat on a hard wooden bench, his knee bouncing nervously as he stared at the opposite wall. 27 years old, and here he was again. Another courtroom, another moment that would define the trajectory of his life. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't the one being judged for his mistakes. This time, he was fighting for the right to correct one. Across the hall, separated by 20 feet of polished floor that might as well have been an ocean, Carrie Vargas sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her two older children sat beside her mother further down the bench, oblivious to the weight of what was about to happen. In her arms, she held 11-month-old Geovanni, his chubby fingers grasping at her necklace as he babbled contentedly. She couldn't look at Dustin. Every time she tried, shame rose in her throat like bile, choking off whatever words she might have said. They had worked together once, in what felt like another lifetime. The restaurant had been loud, chaotic, the kind of place where the line cooks screamed orders and the servers moved like dancers through the cramped space between tables. Dustin had been one of the sous chefs, competent and confident, with an easy smile that made even the worst shifts bearable. Carrie had been a server, trying to make ends meet while her marriage crumbled slowly at home. She remembered the first time she had really talked to him, not just the quick exchanges about orders and table numbers, but actually talked. She had been crying in the walk-in cooler, trying to muffle the sobs so no one would hear. Her husband had screamed at her that morning over something trivial, and the bruise on her upper arm throbbed where he had grabbed her. Dustin had come in looking for produce and found her instead. "Hey," he had said softly, his voice cutting through her tears. "You okay?" She had wanted to lie, to say she was fine, that she just needed a minute. But something about the genuine concern in his eyes had broken through her defenses. "No," she had whispered. "I'm really not." That had been the beginning, not of a relationship. Dustin had been careful to maintain that boundary, knowing she was married, but of a friendship. She would confide in him during their shifts, telling him about her husband's anger, his drinking, the way their marriage had become a prison she couldn't escape. And Dustin would listen, offering quiet support and the occasional piece of advice. "You deserve better than that," he had told her more than once. "You know that, right?" But knowing it and believing it were two different things. The trouble had started the night she told Dustin it was over, that she was done with her husband, that she had finally worked up the courage to leave. They had been at work, and after their shift ended, a group of them had decided to go out to the club. It was supposed to be harmless, just co-workers blowing off steam. But as the night wore on and the drinks kept coming, something shifted between them. Dustin remembered the way she had looked at him on the dance floor, the way her body had moved close to his, the unspoken invitation in her eyes. He had known it was a bad idea. She was vulnerable, freshly separated, and he had just gotten out of a relationship himself. But the alcohol had dulled his better judgment, and when she had suggested they go back to his place, he hadn't said no. "We started drinking a lot together," Dustin had explained to his friend the next day, trying to make sense of what had happened. "One night we ended up back at my place. We had been at the club, got turned up, you know. One thing led to another. What he didn't say was how it had felt in the moment. How for those few hours, both of them had been able to forget their problems, to lose themselves in something that felt good and right and uncomplicated. They had used protection, at least at first, but somewhere in the haze of alcohol and desire, caution had been abandoned. The next morning had brought clarity and regret in equal measure. Carrie had left early, mumbling something about needing to check on her kids. Dustin had watched her go, already knowing that what had happened between them would complicate everything. He hadn't expected her to go back to her husband. "I wanted to work things out," Carrie had told him a few weeks later, her voice thick with emotion. "I know we're separated, but we have kids together. I have to try." Dustin had respected that, or at least he had tried to. He had backed off, given her space, tried to pretend that night hadn't happened. But his co-workers had noticed the way he looked at her, the way his eyes would follow her across the restaurant floor. "Dude, you're staring again," one of them had said, nudging him with an elbow. Dustin had looked away, embarrassed. But it was true. There was something about Carrie that drew him in. Maybe it was her resilience, the way she kept showing up and pushing through despite everything. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just found her beautiful. When Carrie had discovered she was pregnant, panic had set in immediately. She had taken 3 tests, each one confirming what she already knew. The timing was impossible to pin down precisely. She had been intimate with her husband about a month before that night with Dustin. The math was complicated, the possibilities terrifying. Her first instinct had been to call Dustin. "I'm pregnant," she had said, without preamble, when he answered, "And it might be yours." The silence on the other end of the line had stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Dustin had spoken, his voice careful. "Might be. I was with my husband too, about a month before you and me. So I don't know." Dustin had felt the ground shift beneath him. He had 2 children already, living with their mother in Washington state. He sent money when he could, called them every week, but the distance made being a real father nearly impossible. He had moved to Texas specifically to get away from serious relationships, to focus on getting his life together. A 3rd child had not been part of the plan. But as the reality sank in, something else emerged, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Responsibility, maybe, or hope. The possibility that this child could be his had awakened something protective in him, some primal instinct that demanded he know the truth. Carrie, meanwhile, had been torn. Part of her wanted the baby to be her husband's. It would make everything simpler, would give her marriage one last chance to survive. But another part of her, the part she tried not to acknowledge, wondered what it would be like if Dustin were the father. He had been kind to her, had listened when she needed someone to hear her. Maybe he would be different from her husband. Maybe he would be better. She had chosen to believe the baby was her husband's. It was easier that way, cleaner. She had told Dustin as much, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "There's no chance the kid is yours," she had said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "There's no way at all." Dustin had nodded slowly, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. "Okay," he had said quietly. "If that's the truth, then okay." But it wasn't the truth, and somewhere deep down, they both knew it. Carrie had moved back in with her husband when she was 7 months pregnant. They had tried to make it work, really tried. He had been excited about the baby, had painted the nursery and assembled the crib. For a few weeks, it had almost felt like things might be okay, but old patterns were hard to break. The arguments started again. The drinking, the anger. By the time Geovanni was born, Carrie had known the marriage was over. There would be no fairy tale ending, no miraculous reconciliation. She was going to be a single mother of 3, and she was going to have to figure out how to survive. Dustin, meanwhile, had moved north to Austin, trying to put distance between himself and the situation. but the doubt gnawed at him constantly. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if somewhere in Temple a child was being born who carried his DNA. He had reached out to Carrie in September, before the baby was due, sending her a message on Facebook. "Look, whether you like me or not, you need to let me know if this is my child when the kid is born. I have a right to know." Carrie had read the message and deleted it without responding. She couldn't deal with Dustin's questions, not when she was trying to hold her marriage together with both hands. But the message had planted a seed of guilt that grew with each passing day. When Geovanni was born a month early, small but healthy, with a distinctive cry that could wake the whole maternity ward, Carrie had looked at his face and felt her heart sink. He didn't look like her husband. The shape of his nose, the set of his ears, they were different, familiar in a way that made her stomach churn with anxiety. She hadn't told Dustin about the birth. Instead, she had posted pictures on social media, soft focus shots of the baby swaddled in hospital blankets, and hoped that would be enough to satisfy any lingering curiosity. It wasn't. Dustin had moved to Washington to be closer to his other two children, but Texas had a way of following him. Friends from Temple would mention seeing Carrie around town, would comment on how she was doing, would casually drop the information that she'd had her baby. And then one day, Dustin had run into Carrie's mother at a restaurant. "Congratulations on the grandbaby," he had said politely, making small talk. Carrie's mother had lit up, pulling out her phone to show him pictures. And there, in the bright screen of a smartphone, in a crowded restaurant, Dustin had seen Geovanni's face for the first time. The gut feeling that had been dormant for months roared back to life with overwhelming force. That child looked like him. The resemblance wasn't perfect. Babies rarely looked exactly like anyone at that age, but there was something there, something in the shape of the face, the expression, the way the baby's mouth curved. Dustin had thanked Carrie's mother and left the restaurant in a daze, his mind racing. He had to know. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he had to know if that child was his. But when he had reached out to Carrie again, she had shut him down. "Leave me alone," she had written. "I don't need your help. Don't contact me again." Dustin had respected that for a while, but the knowledge that there might be a child out there who needed him, a child who might grow up the way he had, without a father, was too much to bear. He had grown up in the foster system after being removed from his father's care at 13. The years that followed had been hard, marked by anger and poor choices and stretches in juvenile detention. It had taken him years to get his life on track, to become the kind of man he wanted to be. He couldn't let another child go through that. He couldn't let his son, if Geovanni was his son, grow up wondering where his father was, why he hadn't cared enough to stick around. So when Geovanni was 6.5 months old, Dustin had reached out to Carrie one final time. "I need to know," he had written. "Please, if there's any chance he's mine, I need to know." Carrie had stared at that message for a long time before responding. Her marriage was officially over by then, the divorce papers filed. She was working 2 jobs to make ends meet, exhausted and overwhelmed, and drowning in responsibility. And Geovanni, beautiful, sweet Geovanni, was starting to look more and more like Dustin with each passing week. She had finally admitted the truth. "He might be yours," she had written back. "I think he looks like you. I don't know for sure, but I think he's yours." That admission had led them here, to this courthouse hallway, to this moment of reckoning. Dustin had agreed to take a paternity test, despite his doubts about Carrie's honesty. She had lied to him before, multiple times, Why should he believe her now? But the possibility that Geovanni was his son overrode every other concern. The bailiff appeared in the doorway. Angelere versus Vargas, we're ready for you. They stood simultaneously, like actors responding to a cue. Carrie adjusted Geovanni in her arms, whispering something soothing to him as they walked toward the courtroom. Dustin followed a few steps behind, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his mind a whirlwind of hope and fear. Judge Lauren Lake sat behind her bench, a commanding presence, with eyes that seemed to see through pretense and into truth. She had presided over countless paternity cases, had heard every excuse and justification imaginable. But each case was unique, each family's pain distinct and deserving of attention. This is the case of Angelere versus Vargas, she began, her voice carrying authority tempered with compassion. Mr. Angelere, you claim the defendant, Miss Vargas, was married and having an affair with you when she got pregnant. Yes, Your Honor, that's correct, Dustin said, his voice steady despite the nerves jangling through his system. The courtroom audience gasped. The word affair carried weight, implied deliberate deception and betrayal. Judge Lake pressed on. Now you say she initially told you that you were not the father of her 11-month-old son, but then dropped the bomb that the child was indeed yours after her marriage was over. Is that correct? That is correct. Judge Lake turned to Carrie, whose face had flushed with shame. Miss Vargas, you admit that you lied to Mr. Angelere because you say you were trying to save your marriage. Yes, Your Honor. Carrie's voice was barely above a whisper. Geovanni squirmed in her arms, sensing his mother's distress. But now that your marriage is over, you claim you are convinced he is the father of your son, and you're here to prove it today. Yes, Your Honor. The judge's expression was unreadable as she studied them both. Mr. Angelere, how did you end up in a relationship with a married woman? Dustin leaned forward slightly. Well, first of all, Your Honor, Miss Vargas and I, we were never in a relationship. We worked together. We were good friends. She would come to me to confide about her rocky relationship with her husband. That's what happened at first. Then a few weeks later, she came in, said, "It's the last straw. I'm completely done with him." Next thing you know, we became better friends. She brought her kids over a few times. We'd go out at night. We started drinking a lot together. He paused, choosing his words carefully. One night, we ended up back at my place. We had been at the club, got turned up. We went to the house, started doing our thing. Judge Lake raised an eyebrow. Your thing. The courtroom chuckled, and Dustin felt heat rise in his cheeks. That night when we had sexual intercourse. Carrie's voice cut through the moment like a knife. You planned to get me pregnant. I feel like you did. Oh, now that's a... Dustin caught himself before the profanity escaped, remembering where he was. That's a lie. Judge Lake held up a hand. Hold on. I realize that you may hear some things that will evoke intense emotion, but you're not going to act a fool or use inappropriate language in this courtroom. You understand? Yes, Your Honor. I apologize. So you got to find a better way to express yourself. Continue. Carrie took a shaky breath. Okay. That night, Your Honor, I feel like from the beginning, he's always stalked me. Even my friends at work would always tell me, you know, he's looking at you again. Look at him. Really? Judge Lake's tone suggested skepticism. And they said the same thing to you, Mr. Angelere? Yeah. Look, Carrie's over there looking at you. Why would I look at you if I didn't have any feelings for you? If I didn't like you? I don't know. 'Cause obviously you're lying again, Carrie shot back. I'm not lying. I did not plan anything that night, Your Honor. We even started out using protection. Carrie continued over him. He was doing the stalker thing, where I would see him staring at me, and I'd turn and look, and yeah, there he goes again. Well, look at you, you're beautiful, Dustin said, and the audience made a collective awe sound. Come on now, any man who likes women would stare at you. The compliment hung in the air, genuine despite the tension. Judge Lake studied the dynamic between them. The attraction was still there, complicated by resentment and hurt, but undeniable. So, wait a minute, the judge interjected. You're at work, and people are saying to you, oh, he's looking at you. This is making you feel uncomfortable, or you just feel like the guy thinks you're beautiful. I'm like, meh, Carrie said with a shrug. Well, you're looking back, Dustin pointed out. Yeah, because they would tell me you're staring at me again. You looked back and smiled, though. You looked back and gave me the googly eyes. I knew I had you. That's why. The audience laughed, and even Carrie couldn't suppress a small smile at the memory. For a moment, the anger dissipated, replaced by the ghost of what they had once been to each other. Judge Lake brought them back to the present. So, at this point you're married, Miss Vargas? Your Honor, at the time we were separated. So you two were intimate? Yes, just once. And then you found out you were pregnant? Yes, Your Honor. Were you also intimate with your husband at the time? Carrie nodded, her voice small. Yes, Your Honor. A month before me and Dustin had sexual intercourse. Me and my husband were still, so within a 30-day or less time period, you had been intimate with your husband, and also Mr. Angelere. Yes, Your Honor. Dustin leaned forward. She told me it was over between her and her husband, Your Honor. It was, Carrie insisted. Judge Lake fixed her with a steady gaze. Well, she just told the court that she was separated. I try to tell people all the time that you're married until you're divorced. But look, that relationship is for them to handle. I'm trying to understand, during the period of time this child could have been conceived, how many possible fathers are there? There's only him and my ex, Carrie admitted. The judge turned to Dustin. So do you immediately think it was your ex's, or do you think it was Mr. Angelere's, or are you just clueless? She told me the baby was mine, Dustin said firmly. Next thing you know, she's telling me it's her husband's. Carrie's voice cracked. I wanted to work things out with my husband, Your Honor. I wanted to. You got to face reality. So when you first found out you were pregnant, Miss Vargas, did you call Mr. Angelere and say this child is yours? Yes, Your Honor, I first did. Then you decided, I want to try to work this out with my husband. So you tell your husband that it's his. There could be a chance that it was his, Carrie said defensively. Dustin scoffed. Another lie. No, he was willing to take over responsibility, even if it wasn't his. But at 7 months, that's when I got back with him. We actually moved in together. We were trying to work things out. So you tried to work it out? Judge Lake asked. We tried, but it didn't happen. It just didn't work. And at this point, did you tell Mr. Angelere, I'm working it out with my husband? I'm trying. You're not the father. Yes, Your Honor. I was trying to keep him away. Dustin nodded. And I respected that. You told me one time I didn't contact you again. Yes, but you were still texting on Facebook, asking questions. No, I said, if you want to be a real man about it, you gotta let me know if that kid looks anything like me, 'cause I want to know. Judge Lake held up a hand. So what you're saying is, after you told Mr. Angelere you were pregnant and asked him to give you some space because you're trying to work this out with your husband? Yes, Your Honor. I moved away anyhow, You respected that to a certain extent, Judge Lake said to Dustin. But in your mind, you knew you could possibly be the father. I had a gut feeling. So come September-ish, I contacted her and her husband saying, you know what? Reality, whether you dislike me or like me, you need to let me know if this is my child when the kid is born. But she never told me when he was born. I heard from people around town. Then I ran into her mum at a restaurant one day, and she showed me a picture, and that put the gut feeling back in there. Carrie's face crumpled. I didn't want Mr. Angelere to be the father. I didn't want to have another kid. Well, there we go, Dustin said quietly. But the kid deserves better, Carrie continued through tears. He's got to have a mum and a father. We need to come to some resolution, Dustin agreed. That's why we're here. Judge Lake nodded approvingly. Now, you're talking my language. Once you saw the picture of this child, the gut feeling came back. Your gut feeling said, press this a little further. It came back. Yes, Your Honor. So you say you reached out to them both? Dustin explained how he had tried to contact both Carrie and her husband, how he had been told there was no chance the child was his. When she told me, there's no chance the kid is yours, there's no way at all. Long term, when I was in Texas, I was trying to get back up to Seattle to be with my other two children. I didn't want to get in a serious relationship or have any kids. I was trying to save my marriage, Carrie interjected. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to do the right thing. I felt like I was doing the right thing. Yes, I made a mistake, Your Honor, and I'm willing to fix it. It's the reason why I'm here. Yes, I did take a morning after pill, but there's that 99.9% chance. There's a 99.9% chance that you were lying, Dustin shot back. The argument continued, voices rising, old wounds reopening. Judge Lake let it play out for a moment before stepping in to redirect. She asked Dustin about his perception of Carrie's motivations, whether he believed she had intentionally deceived both him and her husband. Yes, because in the first few months, she's telling me I'm the dad. Then I end up getting a job up north. She told me, I want to try to work things out with my husband. I don't want him to try to get me for adultery or have anything happen with my children. I said, well, I can respect that. Do your thing. I moved up to Austin. She still lived down in Temple. I was 45 minutes away. I didn't talk to her. He described hearing updates through mutual friends, learning that Carrie was getting close to her due date, reaching out in September, only to be met with silence. No, I didn't hear nothing. I moved to Washington, and she contacts me on Facebook when the child's 6.5 months old. That's when he looked like him, Carrie explained. My husband left. I don't have no more money. Really? No more money? Dustin's voice dripped with sarcasm. Judge Lake cut in. Wait a minute. So why did she lie? You were the one asking me if I needed money, Carrie protested. Hey, let me help you out because I feel like I'm the dad. You told me, well, you have a child here now, so… I have a big heart, Dustin said. If he is my kid, I took your word again. And I told you, no, I don't need your help. I got this. I had 2 jobs. And then I helped you out. Yeah, you helped me out. But then you kept asking me, do you need some more help? You need some more help? No, I don't need your help. Dustin shook his head. Yeah, 'cause then the belief went away. I took a step back and said, hey, she lied to me from the get-go. She lied to her husband. I didn't lie to him, Carrie insisted. I told him there was a chance it couldn't have been his, and he knew that. Then why did he tell me different? You got proof? No, I don't. Judge Lake leaned forward. So, Mr. Angelere, do you feel like the only reason she's coming back to you now is because it didn't work out with her husband? Dustin considered the question carefully. I believe, if her and her husband were still married, everything was still going on well with them, I would never even hear about this. But I also see where she's coming from, because she wants her son to have a father. And if he is my son, I want to be his father. I want to be involved in his life. And I wanted you to be involved, Carrie said earnestly. I want you to be there. The audience applauded, responding to the genuine emotion in both their voices. Despite everything, the lies, the confusion, the hurt, there was something real here, something worth fighting for. Judge Lake asked to see a picture of Geovanni, and Jerome brought forward a photo. The judge studied it carefully before showing it to Dustin. Beautiful little boy. You're emotional looking at your child because you feel. He calls me Daddy, Carrie said through tears. I'm just hurting for him because I want him to be there for him. And if I am his father, I will be there for him, Dustin promised, his voice caught. But I thought she was just trying to maybe get some money out of me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out several sheets of paper. I have some evidence I'd like to push forward to you. Judge Lake accepted the papers, scanning them quickly. These are messages that say, I need you to give away your rights. I hope you stay away and never come around. I will put a restraining order on you. What kind of mother does that when you think that's the father? What had he done to warrant a restraining order? Nothing, Your Honor, Carrie admitted quietly. So, this is just angry talk? Just being angry. I mean, he wasn't there. He would always make excuses saying, oh, I can't send you money. One time, he said he was going to send money. I waited at Walmart for him to send the money, and he never called me. I waited at least 4 hours for him to call me back. He never called. I had a seizure, Dustin explained. I was in the hospital. I have a medical record. He says that every single time. Judge Lake raised a hand. But now, I have to say this to you. When he was there in your face, and you wanted to try to work it out with your husband, you said, look, give me some space. I want to try to work this out, and I think the child is my husband's. So, he went off. He was born a month early, Carrie said. So, I was thinking, hey, maybe it is my husband's child. Okay, I'll even give you that, Judge Lake conceded. But you got to give a man a chance to digest it and get prepared and get his money in order. You told him to go off, and you were going to be with your husband. And then when you called him back and said, okay, well, I think he looks like you. This is your child. Get ready to get in gear. He still didn't know definitively. The audience applauded, recognizing the fairness of the judge's observation. Dustin nodded vigorously. Davronbek Orziev, October 24th, 2025, 7:39 p.m. When she told me that, it finally had put my gut feeling at rest, he explained. And I helped her out a few times. I helped her out with what I could. I did have some medical issues. She might find that as an excuse. I apologize that I wasn't able to come through on that end. But I also looked at, well, she's lied to me on numerous occasions. I lived in the same city as she did until the kid was 6 months old, 5 months old. Why couldn't she get a hold of me then? I felt like he was starting to look more like you, Carrie said softly, and I wanted you to be there. Do you think he looks like me now? Dustin asked. Yes. Do you? 'Cause my other 2 kids resemble me, spitting image. Of course he's going to look like the mother too. It's not just going to be me, but I don't see many of my traits. I have straight hair. He's got your lips, your nose, and your ears. He is a handsome boy, Dustin admitted with a small smile. The courtroom laughed and applauded. Judge Lake waited for the noise to die down before addressing Dustin directly. This is also particularly important to you because you didn't know your father. Dustin's expression grew serious. Exactly. I just reunited with my father after 15 years, and it's been great. It's been tough growing up without a dad, and I don't think any kid deserves growing up without either one of their parents. That's why I want to get to the bottom of this. What was it like for you? The question opened a floodgate Dustin had kept carefully sealed. I didn't have no structure. I didn't have no direction. I was in and out of jail. I lived with my dad till I was 13, and I was straight-laced. Then I got taken away by CPS, and I didn't see him again until 2 weeks ago. I'm 27 now, so it was very tough. I have an older brother who tried being a father figure to me, and he kind of was, but do you believe that it was this experience that kept you asking those questions to Miss Vargas? Judge Lake asked gently. That kept you trying to figure out, is this my child? Even when you had the doubts, you still wanted to know because you didn't want the cycle to repeat itself. Yes, Your Honor. I mean, look at him. Why does he deserve to only have one parent? That's why I'm here today, Carrie added, her voice breaking. Me too. And that's why I want to know if he's my son. 'Cause he deserves better than that. And I know she's a great mother. I know she is. I saw her with her other 2 children. She's a great mother. Judge Lake's expression softened. You know, I will say this, 'cause I came down on you very hard in this courtroom, and I wanted you to take this seriously. However, I will say that I have seen many men come into this courtroom, and a woman gives them the out and says, "You're not the father. Go ahead about your business," and they do just that. I commend you because you kept persisting to figure out whether this was your son. And that's commendable. The audience erupted in applause. Dustin looked down at his hands, emotion evident in the set of his shoulders. Judge Lake turned to Carrie. Miss Vargas, what are you feeling at this time? Emotional, Carrie whispered, tears streaming down her face. Because I want him to have a father. And that's the reason why you really tried to work it out with your husband. Because you really wanted him to have, I was only trying to save my marriage, that was it. And it didn't work. And I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We all make mistakes, Judge Lake said kindly. You're forgiven. We most certainly all do. Now, with that said, are you ready to learn the results? Yes, Your Honor, they said in unison. Jerome stepped forward with the envelope, handing it to Judge Lake with ceremonial gravity. The courtroom fell silent. Carrie held Geovanni tighter. Dustin closed his eyes briefly, perhaps praying. Judge Lake opened the envelope, her face revealing nothing as she read. Then she looked up at them both. Davronbek Orziev, October 24th, 2025, 7:39 p.m. The results were prepared today by DNA Diagnostics, and they read as follows. In the case of Angelere versus Vargas, as it pertains to 11-month-old Geovanni Vargas, the pause seemed to last forever. Mr. Angelere, you are the father. The courtroom exploded. Applause, cheers, the sound of relief washing over everyone present. Dustin's face crumpled with emotion. Joy, relief, vindication, and overwhelming love, all fighting for dominance. Carrie sobbed openly, clutching Geovanni to her chest. Thank you.